Chapter 15. The Sheikh Reappears. Things happened fast after that. Orloff, with that uncanny ability to anticipate the plans of Sherlock Holmes, put official wheels in motion. I began to suspect that Mycroft had dispatched a covey of his operatives to Egypt to act as backup for his top agent in the field. It was arranged in short order that we were to leave Cairo and head up the Nile to Luxor by rail. Orloff was to remain in Cairo to keep his finger on the pulse of the people, but he informed my friend that a contingent of the Sutherland Argyll Regiment were on manoeuvres around Luxor prior to being shipped to India. I rather gathered that a detachment of the Scottish infantry would be available to Holmes if needed, and such proved to be the case. It was obvious what had prompted Holmes's move. I had not forgotten the departed Cruthers or the fact that he had been investigating an archaeological party in the Valley of the Kings prior to his return to England and death. Then there was that dagger he had concealed on his person, which my friend had identified as property of royalty. With the information that Lu Chan's cipher provided, it seemed realistic to assume that Chu Sanfu had located an undiscovered tomb, though how this fitted in with his exciting Mohammedan unrest throughout the Middle East eluded me. Holmes wished to certify the possibility of a new discovery in the Valley of the Kings prior to the great Mohammedan conclave in Cairo. I found it somewhat alarming that there had been mention of members of the Sutherland Argyll Regiment in connection with this matter, and wondered just what Holmes expected to find in the Valley of the Kings. When we finally did reach Luxor, site of the ancient Thebes, it was evident that Orlov had made ample use of the cable. In the government buildings, we were informed that the Scottish troopers were already over the river on the west bank, awaiting Holmes's arrival. I was again worn and indisposed, for the swaying train had not benefited my touchy stomach. Though nauseous, I was fascinated by the lush green of the fertile Nile plain, more evident because of the stark grimness and desolation beyond it, rising gradually to towering cliffs. Small wonder that the Egyptians have through the centuries loved and cherished their narrow belt of incredibly fertile land, surrounded as it is by a nothingness of rock and sand. It was at the foot of the distant cliffs, the Theban hills, that the historic valley lay in which were entombed so many of the Nile's greatest rulers. There was a look of sadness, almost apprehension, on Holmes's face as he conferred with me after Gray attended to details regarding the crossing of the river and the troops placed at the disposal of the detective. Now, old chap, we must come to a brief parting of the ways. I know our sea voyage did not sit well with you, nor the train trip either. Gray tells me this valley is a desolate and forbidding place indeed. Best you remain here until we reconnoiter the area and find out what's going on. My mouth automatically began to form protests at the mere thought of being left behind when the case was coming to a head, but strangely it was Colonel Grey who weighed down the scales. "Dr. Watson, you must come to my aid. I'm well aware that Mr. Holmes can take care of himself, But no matter how you cut it, I'm responsible. Not only for him, but for those soldiers who are a bit new to this area and only have a vague idea of where they are, save that this is a training area on the road to India. Let's put it this way, if every man isn't tip-top, we're at a disadvantage. What could I say? As a medical man, I well knew I was ill-equipped to trudge over rocky and hilly terrain trying to match steps with vigorous young Highlanders. Holmes's whipcord body and Fencer's legs could manage it, but I saw in my mind's eye a middle-aged general practitioner grasping for breath and falling behind as the column surged forward. I nodded in agreement with Gray's words and tried to summon some esprit de corps to suit the situation. Well, it's a rum show, but you chaps watch out for yourselves, will you? Holmes, for the first time that I could remember, avoided my eyes, but his hand rested briefly on my shoulder, and there was a reassuring pressure from his long, tremendously strong fingers. Then he and Gray were gone. A young lieutenant, but recently from Sandhurst, I judged, who really hadn't the vaguest idea of what was going on, also had the good taste not to try to expand his knowledge of the situation. He took me and my belongings to the Luxor Hotel, and volunteered to show me round the modern city that stood in place of the former capital, Thebes. I declined his kind offer, and after a bath and change of clothes, made my way to the hotel bar for a stiff brandy and soda, which I willed to stay peaceably in my stomach. There is much to be said for assertive action, and after several growls of protest, my intestinal tract reflected a comforting warmth. Since success had favored my efforts, I repeated the dosage and decided to have a look around on my own. There were no claims on my time until Gray and Holmes returned with what information they could glean from the distant hills. Luxor was now a modern city, and a far cry from the river port that had flourished as the capital of so many pharaohs of the old civilization. As I left the hotel in an aimless fashion, I determined to try to detect what remnants of former grandeur had withstood civilization's onrush, and were still in evidence. However, my sightseeing was fated to be of short duration. I was passing the entrance to a mosque when a tall figure left the citadel of religion, turning in my direction so that we were face to face with an acknowledgment of coincidence was impossible to avoid. It was the desert chieftain whom I had encountered near the Sphinx. I confess being taken aback at this unexpected meeting, but the Arabian exhibited no surprise. Rather, his greeting was accompanied by a shrug, a gesture of his acceptance of Kismet. "Ah, the good Dr. Watson, our paths cross again. What brings you to South Cairo?" "I was about to ask you the same thing," I responded guardedly. Holmes chided me on occasion as being the most revealing of men, and I had grown more cautious through the years. My journey to Cairo was, as anticipated, a fruitless one. Another witless tale spewed from idle tongues in the bazaars. He sighed and shook his head. His bearded face and predatory, sharp features reminded me of a desert eagle owl, free and fierce. Men with idle hands and empty pockets do tend towards mischief. But come, doctor, motivations are a subject you hear much of. Let us seek refuge from the fading sun, and I shall secure some coffee for you unless you prefer tea. In a most casual manner, as though our meeting had been planned, the tall Arabian was ushering me to a table at a cafe nearby, and I admitted that the shade cast by its awning was welcome. Whoever my chance acquaintance was, he secured prompt, nay, obsequious service, and we were soon enjoying coffee served in the Turkish manner, in small cups. It was viscous and thick, but strong with a sweetness my taste buds were unaccustomed to. We have now met twice, Doctor, and both times you were separated from your most illustrious companion. I trust that Mr. Holmes is in good health. Well, I thought, this fellow is certainly well informed. My suspicions were aroused, of course. Mr. Holmes is, at the moment, on other business, I replied. Two can play the information game, and I decided to take a stab at it. Sheikh, you are most familiar with me and my friend. Have we met at another time? In England, perhaps? The bearded face registered a negative. As you easily deduced, I was educated in your native land. However, I did not meet Mr. Holmes there. My nostrils quivered at this, and the scent was the musky odor of doubt. Where would Holmes have met an Arabian sheikh, pray tell? I had used that title as a quest for a name, but my companion had accepted it without comment. Then, of a sudden, my thoughts reversed. During the period that Holmes was thought dead, his wanderings had taken him to Khartoum, where he had visited with the Khalifa, a meeting that resulted in information communicated to the Foreign Office. I had always entertained private thoughts regarding his being in the Sudan at that particular time. My friend had never gone into detail regarding this part of his mysterious absence from England, though he had often spoken of his explorations during the same period, when he passed himself off as the Norwegian Sigurdsson. You are then of the Sudan? An affirmative nod joined forces with a smile. I see you have pieced some facts together, Doctor. I am from the South, and do know Sherlock Holmes. I was able to be of some service to him at one time, and, he added with a candour unusual for those of these parts, the reverse is also true. Do I detect some concern on your part for your friend's safety? This land is known to me, and I am, if you recall, obliged to you. This put matters in a different light, for I had heard that even the greatest rascals in Arabia were scrupulous regarding a debt of honor. I had an impulse to match his frankness and decided to give in to it. Holmes is with an expedition going to the Valley of Kings. The Scottish soldiers, he said instantly. Conscious of the return of suspicion to my face, he explained, "My men are camped on the west bank awaiting my arrival. We noted the Highlanders there." He thought for a moment. "Now, what would the King of Sleuths wish to find in the gateway to Amenti?" Amenti? An Egyptian word referring to the underworld, though Wadi Biban al-Maluk is certainly a place of mystery. Actually, that desolate valley under the cliff at Deir al-Bahri was selected in a search for secrecy. It was painfully obvious that I was following none of this, and the sheikh poured me some more coffee. "Forgive me, doctor, but tales of the ancient land are endlessly told round campfires around the desert sky. It was the great king Thutmose I of the 18th dynasty who made the decision. The age of the pyramids was over, for their size was a magnet to the grave robbers, and no secret doors or false passages could outwit them. So the great military pharaoh decided to construct a secret tomb wherein his mummy might remain inviolate for the afterlife. He selected this valley beneath the cliff which he could see from his capital, Thebes. His tomb, constructed by the architect Inemi, was a hidden thing, and its secret was preserved until the 19th dynasty. How this was done but 6 miles from Thebes amazes me. I had difficulty remaining in my seat. 6 miles? Why, I thought the Valley of Kings was at least a day's march away. The the sheik displayed his perspicacity. Had you known it was so near, would you have attempted the journey? Why, yes, I sputtered. Perhaps I've misled you, doctor. The entrance to the valley is 6 miles from the west bank, but the place itself is sizable. Fully 40 Egyptian monarchs were buried there, and some of the tombs are enormous. If I knew where Mr. Holmes was headed. I don't think he knows himself. But you feel he may be in some peril. My memory stirred, and I responded automatically. All things are possible in the caravan of life. Holmes said that recently. The man startled me with a burst of laughter, and he slapped a knee under his robe forcibly. He has not forgotten. It was I who told him that. He seemed to reach for a decision. Come now, doctor. You would be with your friend if possible? My dearest wish. Then it shall be fulfilled. Dearest wishes are the divining rods of destiny. The Scots are gone by now, for they would wish to reach the valley before dark, but even their ground-eating march cannot rival the swiftness of the finest Arabians on these plains. Let us depart, for we have an appointment with Anubis, the jackal god of the dead.